In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to create balance during busy seasons or moments in your life. Let's get right into it. Okay, as you all know, I am currently about to head into a very busy season. I've talked about this a lot in recent videos, but I will be traveling, and so I'm just doing a lot of work before and after the travel, which obviously builds up and becomes quite stressful. So I wanted to share some tips, since I'm also struggling with that right now, on how to basically create balance and maintain a bit of peace and calm throughout a busy season, if that makes sense. I have 4 big tips, by the way. So the first tip is to make a master to-do list. Now, I will just say before I get into the rest of the tips that these tips are going to be kind of chronological on purpose because they kind of go hand in hand. So like I said, the first one is to create a master to-do list. So if you know that you're heading into a busy season, you need to prepare for it, or the busy season itself is just full of a lot of tasks, make a master to-do list of every single thing. Just brain dump, essentially. That can be a task, it can be very general, whatever it may be. Get all of your thoughts down in this master to-do list. It does not need to look pretty. If anything, it should look really messy at this point. What this is going to do is basically empty out your brain and take the stress off of your brain of trying to remember every single little bit and piece, and instead have it down on paper. Once it gets down on paper, that's when you're gonna start to kind of break it apart and make it a lot more tangible and easy to work with, which leads me into the second tip, which is, if needed, break that master to-do list down into actionable items. Say something on your master to-do list or on my master to-do list is to pack for a trip. You can break that down into a packing list. So I have to pack for my trip, which means I need to make a packing list, which means I need to look through that packing list and see what I have and don't have. And if I don't have certain things, I can break that down into a mini grocery list, things like that. So you can see the progression there, starting with something really big like, oh, I need to pack, and how that has been broken down into very tangible items, action items that make it a lot easier to tackle. It makes it feel like you can very easily tackle something such as a grocery list as opposed to packing for a trip. You know what I mean? It feels a lot less intense. So of course that's just an example, but you can use that in any sort of example that applies to you. That's just something that's applicable to me right now. But once you have finished that kind of breakdown of the list, divvy up that master list so that you're doing a few tasks a day leading up to that busy point, event, etc. So this is a really helpful thing for me because realistically, I know certain days of my week, aside from this master to-do list, is going to be busier and not so busy depending on what day it is. And so I use that as my framework when it comes to divvying up my master to-do list that has been broken down. So say for example, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm really busy because I tend to have a lot of meetings on those days. I will do less from this master to-do list on those days and do a little bit more on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, if that makes sense. Of course, once again, this is a very general example, but you can apply it to what works best for you. Say your evenings are always tied up, perhaps do most of your tasks in the morning, and that will be more applicable to you. Okay, so the next tip, I'm going through these tips really quickly. By the way, if you have any questions on anything that I'm talking about in this video, if you need me to break it down a little bit more, I'm always happy to do so. I'm also always open to checking my DMs, so I'm always DMing people, and I know a lot of y'all have been reaching out on DM from YouTube, so I appreciate that, and you can always, reach out to me. But anyway, the next tip is to plop in slow living tasks that are actually practices throughout the day. So, for example, if you know you're gonna have a day with more tasks than usual, like I did in the example with the Tuesday, Thursday, heavy meeting day type of situation, schedule a long lunch or a takeout evening or an extra hour of hobby time at the end of the day. Those are the days that I tend to struggle with the most because I do still end up doing tasks from my master to-do list on busy days like that. It's never like a 0%, I'm not gonna do anything that has to do with my master to-do list on those days. And so I do end up getting stressed out by the end of the day. And so how I'm able to balance that is putting something really indulgent and really self-care-ish to that day that is very adjacent to slow living practices. And I would say it is a slow living practice. So like I said, I would probably order takeout on a day that is really meeting heavy and I did a lot of stuff for my master to-do list. Because I do not have the energy to cook, I know I will get more worked up if I had to do another task after doing all of the things throughout the day. So I would just order takeout, and that feels a little indulgent. It feels like a little treat sometimes, at least for me. And it feels like a reward in that sense, and I think that brings back a little bit of joy and peace into your life. So that's just one example, but another example is last year I did, or maybe it was last year. Last year I did an event for my mom's like big birthday party, and the week leading up to it, or like the days leading up to the actual event where I knew I would be like checking off a ton of things off of my to-do list, I had like a full-blown self-care day. I kind of did a face mask. I didn't do any tasks that were on the list. I just looked at it and made sure that everything was okay. I played a bunch of video games. I read, I hung out, I went out for dinner, things like that. And it was very, very indulgent, and it was exactly what I needed right before things got really critical. And I will say it brought a lot of balance into my life, because the next day when I did get into all of those critical things that I needed to get into, I was feeling very relaxed. I was in a positive mood. I had a positive perspective on everything, and I wasn't starting things off on a bad note and feeling stressed right off the bat, if that makes sense. So that's how I like to create balance wherever possible. Again, it doesn't have to be something as huge as having a massive entire self-care day, but if you're able to do that, I can recommend. It was a very good day. But if it needs to be something as small as a longer lunch than usual, an hour and a half, definitely do that for yourself. It is worth it, because at the end of the day, after you give yourself that time back, after you give yourself that energy back to do things that make you happy, you will be more productive on the other end. I promise you that. And of course, this doesn't have to be right at the end or right before your busy season. This can happen throughout. So like I said, plop things in to your daily to-do list that are slow living adjacent. Just like the examples that I mentioned, or any other types of slow living practices that you personally like. I have a lot of ideas on this channel, of course, but I also have a lot of ideas on my blog. So if you need some tips on what things that you can do that are slow living practices and are simple and quick and can be plopped in this situation, I have a ton of resources on that. I should also say that it is really important to schedule that slow living time. So when I say plop those slow living practices throughout your routine, throughout this kind of busy season setup or schedule or regimen or routine, whatever you want to call it, be sure to actually schedule it in. Be sure to actually write it down as part of your to-do list, because if you don't, you will forget. It tends to happen where you're going to be focusing on all of the more important things. Unfortunately, that's kind of like the default in the way that we think about things, but it is just as important, if not more important. Like I said, you will be more productive on the other end of it. So just remember to write it down. I promise you it is worth it. And on one end, while I said you will be more productive on the other end, at the same time, this will also avoid burnout. So when I said that I did that whole self-care day right before things got super critical with that event that I had hosted or planned, I definitely saved myself from burnout. Instead, what I would have done had I not done that self-care day was just constantly think about my to-do list all the way into the night, probably even while I'm sleeping. That's how bad it gets for me. And I would have woken up in such a hectic mood, to a point where by the end of the actual event, I would not have enjoyed it at all, and I would have been suffering severe burnout throughout the entire thing, when I should be actually enjoying the process. And I can enjoy the process, because we can control that and we can make things more positive. We don't have to be struggling whenever we're in a busy season, contrary to popular belief. So it will create a really positive balance for you, and a necessary balance, I feel. All right, friends, so I sped through that. So let me just give you a quick recap of what I said. 1, make a master to-do list. 2, break down that master to-do list into actionable items. 3, divvy up that master to-do list that you've broken down to doing a few tasks per day leading up to that busy point, season, whatever it is. 4, plop in slow living tasks or practices that you can do throughout those same days where you've plopped in actionable items to do each day. And I say tasks so that I can really drill it in to put it down as a task, even though in reality it's a practice and it's indulgent, it's self-care. And that's pretty much it. 4 tips, I think pretty simple. They go hand in hand, like I mentioned, and I think once you get into this routine of doing this, every time you have a busy moment in your life, it will start to get easier and easier, And you'll kind of look forward to these moments because you know that you've got this, you know that you've got a handle on things, and it won't be stressful and it won't be as bad as you used to think. So I hope these tips are helpful. I definitely feel really great going through them once more as I head into my busy season, and actually in the midst of my busy season, I needed a little bit of a refresher. If you are going through a busy season right now, I am with you. Good luck. If you need any more advice or if you have any questions, definitely feel free to comment down below or DM me on Instagram. But I appreciate you, and I will talk to you in next week's video.